Hi class. So in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about APA referencing, and we'll get a couple of examples and rules for what to include. And this is just related to the journal article assignment. So we're not going to go into all of the different examples of how to reference books and, you know, definitions and that kind of thing. We're just going to look at journal article entries and what to include and what not to include. So we are going to start with our basic entry, and we'll just take a look at this example. So you start with your author's names, and they are inverted. So this is going to be the author's last name. So if I was doing myself, I would put my last name and then the author's initials. So that's what you would include there. And just go back here. So you need to be able to identify the author's last name and then their initials and include that. If there's 3 authors, you include the and symbol, and that separates your last author from the other ones that come before that. And for APA, you can go up to 20 authors, and you'll have to list them all in a row. They changed that with the 7th edition, so that's something new, relatively new. And then if you do have 21 authors listed, you can use the ellipses, which is just ... Oops, here we go. And then have your last, this would be your 21st author listed there. But for this one, you don't need that. So if you have 3, and then you use the year of publication. So when this article was published, the title of the article, and there's no quotation marks around it or anything, and it's the first letter is capitalized. Oops, we don't want that. The first letter is capitalized of the journal article, but everything else is not capitalized. And then we get to the title of the periodical. This is your journal title. And it is italicized, and all major words are capitalized for this one. Then you have a volume number, which is also italicized. You have the issue number that's put into brackets. You have the page range. So it's usually, it will be a range of pages, 213 to 312 or whatever it is. So that's your range. I'm asking you to include the database name just because I want to know that you can use the database system through the U of R or SAS Polytechnic. But some, professors won't ask you to include this information. It's not always mandatory. But for this assignment, I'd like you to include it, please. And then your your DOI. So this is what every article is given, which is a number. And in APA, they ask you to format it with the HTTP as a hyperlink. So it's just easier for me to click on this link, and then it'll take me directly to that article, and it makes it a lot easier to track and source your article quickly. And then I'm also asking you to add the date accessed. Again, some professors don't need you to include this information, so you might see this, the date not included. So when you're writing in your date, you can just say accessed, and then it'll be the day that you looked up that article. So, if it's today, it's September 6, 2021. Oops, 2021, like that. So you would include that information in for this assignment. Again, if you maybe in your other classes, they don't want you to include that information in there. So let's take a look at Okay, so some of the basic rules for your reference that you should include. So it has to be a hanging indent. If you look at our example here, there's a indent, and that just means so your first line is flush or against the margin, but every other line is indented. So that's what we call the hanging indent. And all of your reference should be double spaced. If you had more than one, you just are going to add one for your journal article. But if you had a whole bunch of them in your reference page, that's what you would do. You start by listing last name first. So like I mentioned before, last name comes first, and then you give the initials, first name initials for all of the authors, up to and including 20 authors. So you might have a long list of authors depending on how many have written that article. And then you want to organize your references by alphabetical order. In this assignment, you're just going to have, each entry separate, so you don't necessarily have to worry about alphabetical order for this one. But if you're writing a research paper, you would list all of your sources alphabetically. Like I said, the title of the article is going to be just the first letter capitalized, no quotation marks around it, and if there's a colon in a subtitle, you capitalize the first letter directly after the colon, but it should not be capitalized other than that. The title of the journal is italicized, and it is capitalized for major words. And you would also include the volume, issue, and page range for your article. I also mentioned here that I want the database name, I want the DOI, and I want the HTTP form for the DOI. And I want you to also include the date accessed for this journal article reference. So let's take a look at some examples. So this is just one author of an article. So we have their last name, first initial, year, and the year goes in brackets. Then we have the article title, and just the first letter of the first word is capitalized. Then we have a colon here for a subtitle, so we also capitalize the first letter that comes after the colon. And then we have the journal name, and this one is italicized with all major words are capitalized. We have the volume. We don't have an issue number here. If there was an issue, we would put it in brackets like this one. We have a page range. And then I'm asking you to include the name of the database. Again, this is more optional for other classes. They might not ask this. This one also has to have the proper formatting. So this should actually be a hyperlink. So you can insert link if it doesn't do it automatically for you. Let's see. Oops. Let's just try this again. Okay, so this will be a hyperlink. And then you have your access date. So whatever date you looked up that article. And this again is more optional, but I'm asking you to do it for this assignment. You might see other ones online that don't include this kind of information. If you have two authors, you use the and symbol, which is a shortcut. So you use that between the two different authors. And you're still doing the inverted name, so you're still listing last name and then initials, year, article, title, name of the journal, volume, issue, page range, database name. Here we have the proper DOI link. And oh, this should all be linked. And then the date accessed. So yeah, articles with 3 to 20 authors. Then you would include all of their names above. And again, it might be a longer list. If it's 21 authors, that's when you use the ellipses. So you would just put ... and sometimes it's a little, for formatting, it can be a little finicky. Oops. With all these indents, but it works better in Word, not PowerPoint. So you have your article name, you have your journal name, you have your volume, issue, page range, your database name, your hyperlink, DOI, and then your date accessed. So yeah, that's basically it. This is what it would look like if you have 21 authors listed. So you would use the ellipses there and have your final author's name included. And again, sometimes these references, they're very, technical, and they can get, it's quite a technical process to get everything correct. But it is important to sort of try to follow the model as best you can. Because everybody's references should be exactly the same, and they should be easy to track down for me or anybody who's reading your paper. So that's the whole point of it, of a reference, is for somebody else to be able to find that specific reference or journal article or whatever source you're using. And yeah, that's basically it for reference. My advice is to always find an example online. I use the OWL Purdue page, and it's the Purdue University Writing Lab. They call it Purdue OWL. And it has all of the information about APA style, and it's the most up-to-date. And they'll give you, basic examples for different types of texts. So if your reference page, you're not sure how to do it, they will include examples. So depending on whether you're, citing a journal article or a book or different types of text, a web page, book chapter, article, it's important for you to sort of recognize what type of text you're looking at. So for our first assignment, we're just using journal articles, so it kind of simplifies it that way, that we know exactly what we have. But you might write research papers, and you might use websites, you might use books that you found in the library or book chapter, you might use definitions from a dictionary. So you have all sorts of different types of references. So you want to make sure that you are using the correct model. So, if you're citing a film or documentary or YouTube page, if you're citing an electronic source, all of these have examples that you can find on the OWL Purdue page. So it's the best way is to recognize what you have, what your source is, and then be able to look up a model or an example online that you can just sort of copy the formatting for. No one I know memorizes how to do a reference. Just you always have to basically look for a an example and copy that punctuation and everything to get it correctly, uh, or to get it perfect and correct for your page or your essay. And yeah, that's about it. So take a shot at it. It might take some editing. You have to look closely, look at your period placement, look at capitalization, look at, the order of the names, and that kind of thing. So you pay attention to the details and you should do well in crafting the perfect APA reference.